Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump saying Iran told the U.S. that it's in a state of collapse. The White House this week reviewing how best to protect President Trump after what it calls a third major assassination attempt. A major shakeup in global energy markets. The United Arab Emirates leaving OPEC after nearly 6 decades. What it means for oil prices, the alliance led by Saudi Arabia, and the geopolitical tensions behind the move. U.S. Marines board a ship suspected of trying to breach the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports. Central Command says 39 vessels have been turned around since the blockade went into effect. A terror plot targeting a Taylor Swift concert in Vienna, now a major courtroom development. The accused admitted to parts of the case, what prosecutors say he was planning. Federal agents execute criminal search warrants at more than 20 locations in Minneapolis. Authorities say the operations target alleged fraud. A Chinese national is charged with impersonating U.S. engineers to steal sensitive NASA software, and he's still on the run.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. President Trump saying Iran told the U.S. that it's in a state of collapse. The White House is also reviewing how best to protect President Trump after what it calls a third major assassination attempt. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent, Iris Tao. So, Iris, good afternoon. What is the latest?
Good afternoon to you as well. So President Trump this morning taking to Truth Social, announcing that Iran told the U.S. it's now in a, quote, state of collapse. Also adding that Tehran has urged the U.S. to end its blockade on Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz. And this comes as the White House on Monday announced that the administration is now reviewing a proposal from the Iranian side that suggests that the U.S. should lift its blockade against Iranian ports first and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and then postponing nuclear talks to a later stage. Now, Reuters reporting that President Trump dislikes that proposal, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in an interview with Fox last night, makes clear the administration's red line about Iran definitely cannot obtain a nuclear weapon, while also saying that right now what's blocking the progress when it comes to negotiations is the fact that Iran is still controlled by its hardliners. Watch.
Suffice it to say that the nuclear question is the reason why we're in this in the first place. If Iran was just a radical country run by radical people, but, you know, it'd still be a problem. But they are revolutionary. There's no doubt in my mind that at some point in the future, if this radical clerical regimes remain in charge in Iran, they will decide they want a nuclear weapon.
And the White House this week stressing the fact that President Trump has made clear his red lines, not only to the American public, but also to the Iranian side, as well as other parties in negotiations. Back to you.
And Iris, the White House is set to review security protocols after Saturday's shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So the White House says that early this week, meaning either today, tomorrow, or in recent days, the White House will lead a meeting reviewing security measures protecting the president among officials such as White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, as well as leaders from both the U.S. Secret Service as well as the Department of Homeland Security. And the goal is not only to review the lessons learned from Saturday's shooting at the White House Correspondents Association's dinner, but also to look at what needs to be done going forward to better protect President Trump and other U.S. leaders. It comes as the White House is calling Saturday's incident a third major assassination attempt on the president's life, while also condemning political violence that it says stems from rhetoric that demonizes President Trump from both the media as well as some politicians. Watch.
Rep. Hakeem Jeffries just this month said, "We are in an era of maximum warfare everywhere all the time." Governor Josh Shapiro said heads need to roll within the administration. Senator Alex Padilla said people are, quote, dying because of fear and terror caused by the Trump administration. When you have people in positions of power that are saying things like this every single day for years, you are inspiring violence by people who are already mentally ill. And that's what we've seen against this president for far too long.
And President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump are also harshly criticizing comedian Jimmy Kimmel, which, of course, just days ago before the White House Correspondents' Dinner, in his segment called Melania an expected widow, and also called Stephen Miller a, quote, Hitler baby. And now both Trump and Melania are calling on ABC to fire him, condemning what they call a despicable call to violence. And Kimmel responded in last night's program by saying that that was a pretended roast and refused to directly apologize for his jabs at the U.S. president and the First Lady. The White House today again criticizing Kimmel for that refusal to apologize. Back to you.
So, Iris, the president is also hosting King Charles III today in the Oval Office. What are they saying right now?
Sure. So despite the Saturday incident, the UK and US team did review security measures last minute, but the visit by the king still went ahead. And today, the king is meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office, as well as giving an address to US lawmakers in Congress. And just a while ago at the White House, President Trump saying this. Watch.
Today, we look back on 250 years. Let us remember what has made our countries the two most exceptional nations the world has ever known. And together, let us go forward with even stronger resolve to carry on our sacred devotion to liberty and to the traditions of excellence that have been our shared gift of all mankind.
And tonight, the king will participate at a state dinner at the White House as well. Done.
All right, Iris, thank you. Today, U.S. Marines boarded a ship suspected of trying to breach the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports. U.S. Central Command released footage of the interception, which took place in the Arabian Sea. Video showed military helicopters circling the vessel as Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit rappelled onto the ship. Central Command identified the vessel as the MV Blue Star 3, a commercial ship suspected of attempting to sail to Iran in violation of the U.S. blockade. U.S. forces later confirmed the ship's voyage would not include an Iranian port call and released the vessel after a search. Central Command said 39 vessels have been turned around since the U.S. military began enforcing its blockade earlier this month. And the United Arab Emirates says it's quitting OPEC and OPEC Plus, ending a 59-year membership. The move delivers a major blow to the oil producer alliance led by Saudi Arabia. The UAE is OPEC's third largest producer behind Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It says the decision followed a careful review of its energy strategy and confirmed it was not discussed with other countries. The exit would weaken OPEC unity, already under strain from disputes over production and geopolitics. Gulf producers are also facing shipping challenges through the Strait of Hormuz. The move is seen as a win for President Trump, who has accused OPEC of inflating prices while relying on U.S. military protection. It comes after the UAE criticized fellow Arab states for what it called a weak response to Iranian attacks. And oil prices surged today as tensions around the Strait of Hormuz continue to disrupt global shipping routes. U.S. West Texas Intermediate jumped nearly 4%, rising to around $100 a barrel. Brent crude climbed about 2.5%, setting nearly $111. The rally comes as the UAE's exit from OPEC and OPEC Plus adds further uncertainty to global oil markets. In the aftermath of Saturday night's shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, new focus is turning to the agencies that secure the event. The Secret Service and the TSA both are under the Department of Homeland Security, now operating more than 70 days without full funding as emergency money runs low and lawmakers remain at odds over a path forward. NTD's Chris Bob has more.
Saturday night's events were a grim reminder of the need for law enforcement. Some of the law enforcement officers who responded are working for a department that is currently completely unfunded. I very much hope that after this weekend's events, we can all agree that law enforcement agencies at the Department of Homeland Security and the entire department need to be funded. as quickly as humanly possible.
That urgency comes after a gunman stormed the Washington Hilton during the White House Correspondents' Dinner, an event secured by multiple DHS agencies, including the TSA and Secret Service. The Department of Homeland Security shut down, the longest in U.S. history, leaving multiple agencies without a stable source of funding. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer is calling for a briefing from the Secret Service following the incident, posting on X, quote, "Following last night's assassination attempt against President Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, the House Oversight Committee has requested a briefing from U.S. Secret Service. DHS, including Secret Service, has been unfunded for more than 70 days now. It's time to stop the games and fund DHS." House Speaker Mike Johnson commenting on what comes next in the House in an interview on Fox.
I can tell you the House is doing our job, and our Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer has already announced that we're going to have a review and a hearing with Secret Service. We're doing it as quickly as we can. I expect it'll be within the next couple of weeks.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer doubling down on Democrats' refusal to pass a DHS funding bill that includes funding for immigration and customs enforcement. Posting on X, quote, "Daily reminder that the Senate passed a bipartisan, unanimous bill to fund all of DHS except ICE. Mike Johnson blocked it. He could pass it today if he wanted." Mike Johnson speaking to the urgency to fund DHS later on the Hill.
We have to move DHS funding because it's urgent. As the Secretary of Homeland has said, we're out of money. He's out of money at the end of this week. And so Democrats have been playing games with this. It's very dangerous. As demonstrated Saturday night, we got to get the job done.
DHS has been operating on roughly $10 billion in emergency funding to keep operations running, but that money is quickly running out. DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin warning payroll costs alone exceed $1.6 billion every 2 weeks, putting the department on track to run out of funds by early May. Lawmakers are facing growing pressure to reach a deal as the agencies responsible for protecting the country continue operating in a heightened threat environment. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Chris Bobb, NTD News.
To talk more about the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting, joining us now is Mike Leon, Director of Strategy at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation and host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. And we have Tony Kinnett, National Correspondent for the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. So good afternoon to you both. Thank you for coming on. Tony, I understand you were at the dinner. Can I get your point of view here? What was going through your mind as it unfolded? What were you feeling? What did you see?
Well, first of all, good to see both of you. Initially, we actually thought it was a bomb threat. No one believed initially that those 3 bangs that we heard from outside the room when all of the doors were shut were more than maybe just a couple of trays falling or someone, maybe a waiter. It's very tight in that particular ballroom, might have dropped something. And then there was an individual who was running towards the dais in the center of the room, running towards the large table. And that, at least we'd initially thought, would maybe have been the perpetrator. We actually thought there might be some type of an IED situation that was unfolding. I stood up, shoved our White House correspondent to the ground, and I tried kind of taking my phone out and recording things. I was amazed how quickly the Secret Service started sweeping the room with weapons drawn. For the next hour, all of you knew far more than we did on the inside of that room. The cell service was less than abysmal. And it was jammed. That said, it would made Smuckers jealous. So there was really nothing to do but kind of wait for news to trickle in as we got that perspective. But I know that at the end, I had a couple of gripes with the president of the WHCA for not kind of giving us a couple of details before we went out to find the National Guard in front of the building. But I'm very thankful law enforcement was able to apprehend the shooter. Obviously, I have questions, as many do. But at the moment, it was just a lot of anxious waiting. And if you'll forgive me, hungrily so. The salad course with the block of brie wasn't doing it for me. I didn't take a bottle of wine, though.
Yeah, you say you were hungry. We actually saw footage of a guy sitting in his chair still eating the salad while everybody else. So Mike, can we get your comments now? What are your thoughts on the security level? Because one of our reporters was at the dinner. Yep. On Saturday, she told me until you get to about a yard from the ballroom door, there were no metal detectors, no pat-downs. They didn't check every single person's bag. And apparently the dinner ticket looked very similar to last year's ticket, almost the same. So potentially someone who's not supposed to be at the dinner could have gotten in if they had a ticket from last year. So Mike, just your overall comments on the security.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm glad everybody's safe and sound, including Tony. I had a close family friend that was in the room, and a lot of reporters from all the outlets, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, CNN, a lot of friends in the room. So I agree with Tony on the cell phone service because I couldn't get a hold of the one family friend until later on. And the trickle of information, like Tony said, I was getting more information just watching the news than they were inside of it because the entire press corps happened to be in that room. So I'm glad that everybody made it out safe and sound. And in terms of the security, and Tony can obviously speak to this better, I want to speak to it a little bit more from having worked, obviously, for Madison Square Garden and some other major venues with respect to security and breaches and things like that, and plans that you go over from a format perspective. You know, if you watch the video that was released from that entrance, and it looked like, and I was saying this last night on our show, that it looked like it was a point in the period where this person had picked where there'd be low occupancy and frequency. If you just look right there in the B-roll that's playing, there's 2 to 3 people that are at the metal detector line on the right-hand side of that video, whereas he's coming in right dead center in the middle. So he knew that it would be right around the point when there's nobody there, and he could bypass that if he just got one straight run through. Now, some people could say that was poorly planned or really well planned because he was able to get to a certain point. But to piggyback on what Tony said, and the president said this too afterwards, it really showed what Secret Service was able to do to apprehend this guy, to at least have everything, for all intent and purpose, secure once he was able to breach security, if that makes any sense. Now, in terms of the multiple entrances to get into this and where this is always held at, I know Substack was holding something a few blocks away, so the street corner, kind of got shut down afterwards. Like, this is one of those things where we need to be more proactive than reactive, right? That's correct. A line that I always say in my industry. And unfortunately, when it comes to things like this, we're heavily reactive. But the question will be when there's another event, similar to what we saw with Butler, PA, once outdoor events started to happen again, it was bulletproof everywhere. Why wasn't there bulletproof everywhere before that in terms of the Butler stuff and doing outdoor events with politicians, right? So I think what comes from the reactive, Don, needs to be implemented in the next one so we can be a little bit more proactive, centralize the security checkpoints, and reinforce everybody through one line. I don't care if it's Coachella and there's a million people waiting in the line. Because of what happened, these are the new measures in place, and that's what we need to do. Hopefully that comes from all of this. Right.
I agree with that. So Tony, I was talking to our White House correspondent, Iris Tao, about this. She said if the suspected shooter actually didn't run through that checkpoint, if he just blended in with everybody else, calmly walking through, perhaps he could have even gotten closer to the president. What was your experience with security at the event?
So I was looking for it off camera, and I'm kicking myself not for bringing it, but I have the ticket here with me in studio, and mine actually has the word duplicate written on it in Sharpie because it wasn't my original ticket. I was able to actually bluff my way in and essentially showing an email that the security guy did not even look at into the building, where eventually they ended up giving me a replacement ticket once we were in the building. And again, no one is foreign to those kind of situations where you have to say, hey, I don't have the ticket. Can I be let in? And you try to convince the person to let you in. Good people can do that. Bad people can do that too. And then, of course, there were only 2 of those magnometers, only 2 of those metal detectors. And from the footage, it looks like, to me, at least as a former FBI official said, it looked like they were in the process of maybe taking those down, or at least limiting that to just one metal detector station. Again, it was a very easy, and as much as I hate to say this, because again, I far be it for me to criticize the individuals who kept my life among many saved that evening. Just as a standpoint, he was already past them before they were reacting, and in kind of a constant awareness, head on a swivel situation, that's a serious mistake. And there are a lot of serious mistakes in that. I agree with Mike wholeheartedly. These things need to be set up. We tried keeping the hotel and the bar open for general customers. No. After the first assassination attempt in Butler, they shut down half of Milwaukee. I know, I was driving through it. And so now, when I look at the hotel, why were we not shutting down the whole block? We've done it all these other times, but you had protesters outside the doors with the signs held up. Of course, your Washington correspondent at the NTD knows this. With this, it made her froze solid, according to her tweet, that we need everyone in there dead. Those are the kind of words on the signs. And it was just, well, it's fine. It's America. So like that just kind of nonsense is not, as Mike says, proactive. And that leads us to have to overforce things on the reactive side.
Okay, but Mike, do you agree that the response after the fact that there was a shooter detected, the Secret Service's response was adequate, to say the least? The director of the Secret Service says it shows, and this is a quote from him, it shows that our multi-layered protection works. What are your thoughts on the response?
You know, we were kind of talking about this because my co-host Nick Savary, who's been on this network before, is kind of the historian, right? And he was talking about post-JFK and having all of the consolidated power all in one room, all the successions all in one room. And when you're going to do that, to Tony's point, you really have to have a very detailed outline of security. I can only take this from the example of close family friend of mine does security right now for Bad Bunny and Adam Sandler on the different world tours, respectively. He was explaining to me the planning that went around the Super Bowl, right? Every single little minutia detail that came into Levi Stadium in San Francisco was accounted for, double and triple checked. This is for the most popular artists in the world, streaming wise. I can't, the level of security that he has should pale in comparison to what the leader of the free world has. And if you heighten that by times X, because you have the speaker there, you had Pete Hegseth there that we just saw in the montage, you had RFK Jr. there, you have members of the cabinet that are there. So to Tony's point, again, Tony was on the ground. I was actually supposed to be at the Correspondents' Dinner. I didn't go this year because my daughter's birthday falls on the 25th. So there was an event that Chuck Rocha, a friend of mine, was having there in DC. He had invited me to, and then I was going to go to the Correspondents' Dinner later that night. And I mean, thankfully, again, given everything that happened, I'm glad that I didn't get to go. But the common refrain that you're hearing from conservatives, from Democrats, from anybody with an RDI next to their name is like, this is ridiculous on the security front. Like, it was very lackadaisical. We saw a lot of videos coming out, mainstream outlets, independent media outlets. And so I agree that we got the shooter down. I can't believe unharmed, but let's go with that for a second. But we got the shooter down and we located that. The problem is now, how the hell was this guy able to, because he doesn't live in Washington, D.C., he lives in Torrance, California, according to reports. How was this guy able to get all of these weapons, get past security? To Tony's point, maybe they were taking down the security gates there and consolidating everything to one entrance for the people that were arriving late. But even if that's the case, it needs to be quicker on that front. Again, reactive versus proactive. There needs to be measures when you have that much of the succession plan in one room, including the free press of the United States. So I'm very shocked and appalled that we have those kind of lax securities for so much. I don't mean this to like be demeaning. Like, there's a lot of important people in that room. Like, what are we doing here?
So Tony, do you think the response by the Secret Service and the security was good enough?
I'm respectfully going to decline most of that question. I don't think that in a situation in which someone's in a burning building and the fire department arrives 2 minutes late, but the fire department still pulls them out of the building, that the individuals saved from the burning building would then say, hey, fire department, you were late. And I don't normally do this, but I'm respectfully going to decline to answer that question. I don't think it's appropriate for me to do so. Okay,
so Mike, now, the narrative surrounding this, one of them at least, I want to get your guys' comments on whether Cole Allen's actions were a product of the rhetoric against Trump. And this is what the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said yesterday. Let's take a listen.
Those who constantly falsely label and slander the president as a fascist, as a threat to democracy, and compare him to Hitler to score political points are fueling this kind of violence. When you read the manifesto of this shooter, ask yourselves, how different is the rhetoric from this almost assassin than what you read on social media and hear in various forums every single day? The answer, if you're being honest with yourself, is that there is no difference at all.
So, Mike, is it logical to say that if the manifesto's language matches that of the rhetoric that has been directed at Trump, then the actions by Allen was a result of this rhetoric?
Okay, so this is where the tough questions come in, boys. Okay, so we're going to try to do this one. I'm going to try to do this one as somebody that didn't work at Fox News and now does this podcasting space, right? So here's the issue that I truly have, and I've said this a bunch on this show, and I say this not as somebody who sits on the couch and watches this stuff. This is somebody who's in this space, those creators in this space, has been in green rooms with some of these people. You know, somebody comes in, what are we going to do today to make the Democrats mad, boys? You know, like that kind of stuff is not what Tony and I do on this panel, on this segment. And I think if we could take this segment and show it to people on how to actually have discourse about policy and implementation, the world would be in a better place. And I don't mean that to toot Tony and I's horn. I mean it in that when people are riding the algorithm train, you know, the Mets are on a 12-game losing streak. Well, it's because of Mamdani, because he's a communist. Are we upset that Mamdani got these type of threats and something that almost happened to him as well? Because we should have that same level of ire given what just happened with Trump and in that room. And I've said this before, Donald Trump is not a Nazi. I don't agree with that at all. There are a lot of things that I disagree with from a policy implementation standpoint. He's not somebody I voted for. I voted for President Biden. I voted for Kamala Harris. Again, wouldn't have voted for Kamala Harris if there was a different Republican nominee on the ticket. But that's about policy, and that's about who I want to be in charge of domestic and foreign. And what happens is that we have a lot of creators in this space that are doing that type of content to ride that wave. They're making the thumbnails to ride that wave. And it's being fed to all of us in our content machines. And, you know, Caroline Levitt, I don't know if she watches NTD. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We know who we're talking about there. But like Caroline Levitt, if you're the press secretary and you have, you know, this reign and control over a pulpit like this that I'm holding here, but it just happens to say the official seal of the White House, the buck stops with you guys, and you have to be better. You have to be better. I hated it when KJP did certain things like this and lied. I hate it when you're lying. You have to be better at this. And I don't mean your job. I mean, those are carefully crafted and written out sentences that she's reading. Change a lot of those words and verbiage. As somebody who used to put that stuff in prompter for Sean Hannity, change it. It starts with you. When you use that type of language, it's Pavlov's dog to people. And so now they think, well, it is radical Democrats, left, loonies, and we ignore all the other stuff that the other party has done in this. I'm not absolving them, but I'm saying we can't continue to do that. If you truly want to break the chain, it starts with you. So for her to go out there and do that type of speech, telling us that she's leaving on maternity leave, but before she does, she's going to give me one more salvo here, one more for the road, to quote Sinatra, and she's going to do that. That doesn't help us. That doesn't get us to the place that Tony and I truly want to be at, which is this net neutral. And we're just arguing about policy and implementation and what we expect out of our leaders. It's never going to get there, Don, because there's no money made in the middle, as I have learned. It's not my sole revenue model. It's other people's sole revenue model. That's the problem in all of this. I hope it changes. It never will, but we shouldn't be fanning the flames. We really all should take a step back, introspective, and look at it and say, hey, how can I tweak what's in prompter? How can I tweak the speeches so that these words are actually a little bit more about what Republicans are doing versus using all of these buzzwords and phrases that we're criticizing the left for doing about the president of the United States?
So, Tony, what do you think about what Caroline Levitt said?
I think that when I look over Caroline Levitt's statements, there are a couple of things that I agree with. I think that her summative assessment of what's said on social media does in fact match those words of the shooter. I don't think that correlation and causation are the same. And I agree with what Mike said about the point of this is something that needs to change. I don't know if it's going to. I'm reminded of the words of Winston Churchill when he took power, again, heading into World War II. And he made the case that there were many things he would do differently, and there are many things throughout history leading up to it that he would have seen turn out differently so that those actions were not necessary. And it bothers me because I remember sitting through the years of George Bush being called a Nazi, and then I remember that Romney was going to put you all back in chains, and I remember all of this. I remember when Obama was elected, and it was, oh, he's a Muslim with the Muslim prayer curtain. I remember these things. And I remember when we went from having diplomats to going to this kind of cable news style clickbait with the big thumbnails and you're all going to die style rhetoric. And what that has created is an abdication of care about the legislature and who should be holding power. And now we have the every president holds the emergency powers of the legislature in the hands of the executive. I hate that. I despise that. And then there is an issue at the same time here where it is when there is a Republican in office, all of the onus is on we need to make sure, and by this is not at all pointed at Mike at all, to be clear, and make that very pointed and clear. What Mike said is absolutely correct. From the generalized media, as soon as MS Now was finished, for example, talking about the statements by Trump saying, we got to have unity, it was, well, I hope the president's going to be the one that leads on that. And that kind of nonsense isn't helpful, because I seem to remember when the shoe was on the other foot, those places change. And so this is, again, the Trump is the coroner, the beast is already dead. And I think that, again, I'm like Mike, I really wish things would be different. I don't know how they change. This is where I would say, honestly, spiritual revival for the country is deeply necessary, and a cultural revival as well. And that's what I'm making for, because I think that we're heading into a very dark and dangerous place. And I don't say that as a fearmonger for clicks. I say that as a man who is worried.
So, Mike, is it your position that radical political rhetoric on the left is equal to that of the right directed to the left as well?
I don't know if I would frame it like that. I mean, Cato Institute and other places have done, data in terms of like political violence. By the way, we should be against all violence just because it's violence against political figures. There's also violence happening against everyday people. We should be against all of that. I don't know why we separate out political violence
that you have to say
from
that.
the violence. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But Cato Institute did something about that. There's obviously far more that's committed from a political ideology standpoint from one party versus the other. But if you just look at the last 16 years, Don and Tony, everything from Gabby Gifford's shooting, Steve Scalise's shooting at that park, the attempted attacks on Justice Kavanaugh, Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, the Governor Shapiro arson stuff, Paul Pelosi getting beaten with the hammer, obviously the husband of Nancy Pelosi. You have obviously what happened in Minnesota with the Democratic lawmakers and GOP lawmakers. Like there's Charlie Kirk's death, obviously not a political figure, but a political podcaster, let's call him for lack of a better term. And then obviously what happened this year with Mamdani, you had the Butler shooting with President Trump, you had what just happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It touches all of us. And to go back to what Tony said, I don't know how we fix it. No, I do know how we fix it. It's the fixing it is not the hard part. The hard part is incentivizing people to fix it. It's the same thing with gas prices, right? Like, why would a corporation lower their price? Or forget gas, any store. Why would I make that $10.99 when it should be $15.99? I need to make money. I know you can't afford it, but why would I lower it back? What incentive do I have to lower it back? So what incentive do creators and I'm not going to name any individually, there are a bunch in my phone on both sides, by the way. What incentive do they have to lower the temperature? They don't have, there is no incentive. This is their revenue model. This is their sole source of revenue stream because, and I'm just going to use conservative media as an example because that's the one I'm most familiar with because of my working at Fox News. But if Tommy Lahren doesn't do it, guys, Kennedy's going to make a video. If Kennedy doesn't make a video, Jenna Ellis is going to make a video. If Jenna Ellis doesn't, it's so on and so forth. On the left, there's not as many. Like if Pod Save America doesn't do it, yeah, maybe somebody else will do it that I can't think of. Mehdi Hassan as an example. But there's somebody right behind them that will do it, and they lose their place in line if they don't do it. So how do you, I know how to fix it. Fixing it is not the issue. It's incentivizing people to understand that it needs to change. It starts with them. They're going to lose money if they do that, so they're not going to do it. Tony and I are going to continue to have a job. We're going to continue to talk about this stuff on panels, and this will be your home for actual civil discourse and dialogue and how you're supposed to have debate about policy implementation, politicians, et cetera.
Okay, speaking of incentive to change, and I want to bring up Jimmy Kimmel because people are calling for him to be fired. You guys know the comment he made. He said, "Glow like an expectant widow." Should he have said this? I mean, Caroline Levitt commented on this, saying it's it's language that is completely deranged. Why make such comments in the first place, Tony?
I mean, again, that just goes to Mike's comment. I mean, the outrage, it's good for Kimmel to get out there and parrot the kind of Hassan Piker, Jennifer Welch stuff. It's good for the ratings. It is, absolutely. Because if you're not standing up to Hitler, then you're complicit. That was being shouted at me as I walked into the dinner. Now, a couple of things are true here. First of all, should the FCC be messing with ABC and Disney over this? No. Should the president call for him to be fired? As a husband, someone says, hey, I hope that your wife finds you dead, or I bet your wife would like you being dead, you know what? I'd say a reasonable response would be, well, I hope you're fired. I get it. I do. I get that. But, again, we're going to look at this and say, oh, this is some one-off situation. No, it's not. Trump's been shot at several times. We've gotten at this kind of a situation, which again, of course, in the Butler shooting, Corey Comparatore was killed in that. And now we get this kind of riffing off of it. Kimmel's doing a bit. It's in poor taste. It's disgusting. And it is. And it's disgusting anytime we see this from any political perspective. It's disgusting when Hassan Piker, who I would very much like to see thrown out of the country as fast as we could put him in the nearest catapult for saying that kind of garbage. Or if you want to take some guy on the alt-right, when Tucker goes out and makes excuses for regime slaughtering people from whatever perspective, it's disgusting. It's reprehensible. Should the FCC be getting involved? No, I think that the accurate response would be from the average consumer, take the remote, point it at the TV, and shut it off.
Right.
So, Mike, your comments on that, but I also wanted to tell you this story. Our White House correspondent was on her way to the briefing on the night of the shooting, and she overheard teenagers reacting to the news of the shooting. They were laughing, and they said they wish they got him. What does that tell us, Mike?
Well, it tells us that we're heading in a bad place, back to Tony's overall point. Hopefully we can move the train back on the tracks. But in terms of the Kimmel stuff, it always drives me crazy when comedians or pseudo comedians, let's say, enter this political space with content. Because I know he does an opening monologue, and the majority of it is geared towards the president, just like Jay Leno used to do or Johnny Carson used to do and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think there's time and place, right? Like there's a time and place from a joke perspective to insert something, right? Like Tony just gave his experience of what happened in that room. Again, I mentioned my little cousin is a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. So she happened to be in that room. The last thing I want to do is hear a monologue from Jimmy Kimmel about, like a shooting that could have potentially, forget about President Trump just for a second. What if the shooter just came in? Wolf Blitzer has a very vivid description of the shooter just being like feet from him. And there's been a lot of posts, from friends of mine at CNN being like, I'm glad this guy's safe because he got thrown to the ground by a Secret Service. Like, what if the guy just came in randomly shooting and happened to get a few shots off and killed some members of the media? Does Kimmel's team say, let's start the monologue with this? Because they pre-tape it. And remember, this happened on a Saturday, the dinner. So I just think there's a time and a place to do that. You want to make fun of President
CNN
Trump. Agree with what Tony said. Exactly. You see, there's my point. There are, and by the way, I say this now as the head of content at another network in a different vertical with respect to sports, but like, I will make executive decisions based on, let's say someone passes away obituary wise, but that person passed away in their sleep versus that person was, killing someone and then got shot to kill. I would probably not put the content out about that person anymore, right? If we think WWE and Chris Benoit as an example, like there are certain things that you have to think about. There have to be people like me on the inside. Tony knows this being at Signal, that you just gotta, let's put the pause on pushing this out to the mass audience. And so I think for Jimmy Kimmel's team, maybe next time don't write that type of stuff up, but agree with Tony, FCC, calm down. President Trump, natural reaction to say, I hope he gets fired. He says it all the time. Doesn't mean that a private company should get involved. To Tony's point, just like the election this coming November with the midterms and in 28, let your voice be heard at the ballot box or with the remote. You're the power of the consumer. You have the wallet. That's how you make your voice heard. Let's not get anybody else in the way of freedom of speech, to be honest.
All right, Tony, just one last question, and then I'll get Mike's response as well. And then I think we would have covered everything on this topic. Does this incident make the argument stronger that a White House ballroom needs to be built?
Yes, and not from the, how it looks. I've said for an age and a half, I know the WHCA's had concerns. Well, maybe we couldn't hold something there. Of course you would. If you're going to have members of the presidential succession there, and for laughing at the president, and for good-natured ribbing between the press corps and the president, which should exist, I think so. I think absolutely. Again, I don't even think that, look, if you want to bring in past Democrat presidents to make people happy here so they can help shape matters of the White House, ballroom, things like that, okay. If that's what needs to be done here to make some kind of amends. This is something that's been an issue for Washington, D.C. for a very long time. It's not innately imperialistic to have a stateroom or a ballroom in this case. I think it is necessary. And yes, despite the fact that President Trump also tweets ugly things, for example, like when Robert Mueller passed or others have passed that were gross, that doesn't take away from the necessity of certain buildings like this being built just because Donald Trump is the guy that a lot of people don't like who's heading up that particular project.
All right, Mike, final thoughts.
In my world, there's must-haves, nice-to-have, table stake things. Ballroom is a nice-to-have. There's got to be, on the security front, more done from a proactive standpoint when you have all of those Succession folks in the room, not the HBO series. I'm talking about 1600
Absolutely.
Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm talking about all the three-letter agencies and the heads of those. There has to be something that's done on that front. Should a ballroom be a priority given what happened Saturday? Given what Tony just said, I would say no, that's not a priority. There are other things we should do, especially if it's taxpayer funded. But that doesn't mean that, to Tony's point, that we need to be more proactive in security measures and figure out a secure location that could house something like this, especially if the president, the VP, the speaker, the Secretary of Defense /War is going to be there. I totally agree with that front. But I don't think that this is what happened Saturday is horrific. Doesn't mean that it translates into a necessity for having a ballroom, given what I just said.
Well, all right, let's leave it there. Another great conversation today. Thank you both, Tony, Mike.
Really appreciate
Thanks,
you guys.
guys.
Thank you.
DHS agencies running on emergency funds after the D.C. shooting. Lawmakers divided on a path forward as the clock ticks toward a funding deadline. More news after this break. Don't go away.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
Today's seniors are enjoying life more than ever before, and part of that comes from the independence of driving.
However, car insurance for older drivers becomes more expensive the older we get.
Just because I'm a senior, and maybe you are too, do we really have to pay outrageously high insurance rates? Well, the answer is no, we don't.
When was the last time you checked to make sure you're paying the lowest available rate? Well, maybe it's time to give your car insurance a tune-up, just to make sure your rates are running properly.
You change your oil, you change your tires, well, maybe it's time to change your car's insurance company.
Are you paying too much for your auto insurance? If so, you're just throwing your money away.
So the only way to really know if you're paying too much is to call the number on your screen.
1-800-952-5196. 1-800-952-5196.
You'll speak with a licensed insurance agent. They may have an insurance plan that could lower your yearly premiums by hundreds of dollars.
Seniors can save money on their car insurance.
So call right now and find out just how much money you might be able to save.
Come on, call now.
You may be able to save a lot of money, maybe hundreds of dollars a year. Just call the number on your screen and speak with a licensed insurance agent.
Yes, it is possible for seniors to save on car insurance. You could lower your premiums by hundreds of dollars a year.
As a responsible driver, you always check your gauges, right? And you check for other cars and pedestrians. You check your oil and you check your mirrors.
Well, now is the time to check on your auto insurance rates. You need to make sure that you're not paying more than you need to. Call the number on your screen right now.
1-800-952-5196. 1-800-952-5196.
After the shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, questions are mounting over how the event was secured by federal agencies already operating without full funding. Now pressure is building in Congress as lawmakers weigh how to keep DHS agencies funded while emergency money runs low. Joining us now is Laura Reyes, former acting DHS Chief of Staff and Director of the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation. Good afternoon, Laura. Good to have you here. Thank you so much. So what happened on Saturday? Does that highlight the need and urgency, in your view, to fund DHS and put aside the politics?
Absolutely. And DHS hasn't been funded since Valentine's Day. And the employees have gone many paychecks without being paid, yet continue to work to secure Americans. The Secret Service is the latest iteration on display, and this is not a component of DHS that you want in the news. No news is good news when it comes to Secret Service, and yet they are in the news because of the assassination attempt on the president and cabinet members' lives on Saturday. This comes on the heels of TSA airport screeners and the long lines that were forming during spring break because many agents there were calling in sick or just quit. They were fed up with the inability of Congress to fund DHS, and who can blame them? This is no way to run a federal government. The Congress has two main jobs: legislate and appropriate the federal government, and they seem incapable of doing either.
So as you know, Laura, the FIFA World Cup is approaching, and President Trump has put a lot of emphasis on that. In your view, would the impact be significant if we still don't get DHS funded by then? What would be the impacts?
We would have more TSA agents quit and more DHS quit. Secretary Mullen of Homeland Security right now is paying DHS employees based on emergency money at the direction of President Trump. But Secretary Mullen has said that money, emergency money, runs out next week. And so truly, the administration is out of funding options at that point. We would see many more DHS employees quit to look for other work so that they can pay their bills and support their families. And here we are in America's 250th. We have the World Cup coming here. We have a lot of events scheduled around July 4th. There's going to be a lot of travel. And what a high value target for our adversaries to strike against America in its 250th. Congress needs to do its job, the Democrats in particular, because they're the ones withholding funding because they want to punish ICE and prevent ICE from deporting deportable aliens. They need to fund all of DHS this week.
Right, and let's not forget, we're in a war right now with Iran. I mean, does a prolonged DHS shutdown create, these vulnerabilities, as you mentioned earlier, for adversaries, like Iran, China, and potentially others, Russia?
Of course it does. And we just lived through 4 years of open borders, and we know that many thousands, if not more, special interest aliens came into the country through very open borders. And so Congress needs to stop playing chicken with the terrorists who some of whom are probably already inside the U.S., thanks to Biden's open borders, and planning an attack or multiple attacks. This is reckless, it's negligence, and they need to fund all of DHS right away to protect Americans. Homeland security is not a slogan.
So what is your response then, to Democrat demands to reform ICE, as they say?
Well, we're talking about appropriations bill, and if you want to reform an agency, that's policy. That doesn't belong on an appropriations bill. That's long been the rule, and if Republicans dared to put policy on an appropriations bill in the past, then the Democrats prevented it. Yet now that's what they've been doing for months. So if they want to reform ICE, they should introduce a policy piece of authorizing legislation and pass that through the committees and to the floors for votes. But such changes do not belong on an appropriations bill.
So, John Thune, the Senate leader, was saying Democrats have essentially removed themselves from from this process. What do you think of the current plan right now? A two-track strategy, splitting DHS funding into two parts, funding most of DHS, and then a separate Republican-led plan to fund ICE and Border Patrol via reconciliation. What do you think about this strategy?
Well, first, it's fiscally reckless for the Democrats to first fund all of the federal government except DHS, because, again, they want to punish ICE and prevent ICE from doing its job, and then be willing to fund all of DHS except ICE and Border Patrol, again, to prevent deportations of their voter base. And so now the situation is we have the Senate is using a reconciliation bill to fund ICE and Border Patrol for 3 years, the remainder of the administration, so we don't repeat this exercise every fall and winter. But unfortunately, we're having to use a reconciliation chip, and they are rare, to address what the Democrats have set up. And so we believe that on the House side, the House should go further and make other federal spending cuts in addition to just funding CBP and waste their what is likely one remaining reconciliation chip this year just to fund what DHS has used as a tactic. They should go farther to make other serious needed cuts to decrease our deficit and give relief to Americans.
What is your view on the filibuster? Because there has been talk about removing it, but where do you stand on this?
Well, this is a procedural, antiquated rule policy of the Senate, but there's already exceptions to it. There's been exceptions made to confirm judges. There's been exceptions now for using reconciliation for budget. So what's left? It seems to be an excuse for leadership to not pass legislation that the vast majority of Americans support. For example, the Save America Act, to bring election integrity and confidence in our elections back to this country, to require someone who's registering to vote to show proof of citizenship, and then when they do vote, proof of ID, as well as cleaning voter rolls regularly. But for some reason, Senate leadership is hiding behind the excuse of a filibuster, and not even the proper use of the filibuster, to not pass that bill. And it just begs the question, why?
Okay, Laura, just one last thing here. President Trump has set a hard deadline for June 1st to have a bill on his desk. What is your feeling about this deadline? Do you think Congress can make it? Do you feel optimistic? What is your feeling?
Well, I think that goalpost may have moved. I mean, originally the June 1st deadline was the reconciliation bill to fund ICE and CBP. It was after that where he directed Secretary to pay all of DHS using One Big Beautiful Bill emergency money. And it's that pot of money that DHS Secretary Mullen now says runs out after next week. So we are out of time. And Congress has shown that when it wants to pass something quickly, it is perfectly capable of doing so. They need to appear more than just 3 days a week, not go on recess all the time, stay in town and hurry up and pass full funding for all of DHS.
All right. Well said, Laura. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
Now to Minneapolis, where federal agents have executed criminal search warrants. Authorities say the operations are part of investigations to alleged fraud to investigate. Fox News first reported on the raids, which largely targeted Somali-owned businesses, including daycares. Fox reports that Quality Learning Center was among more than 20 locations searched by the FBI and Homeland Security investigations. Back in December, independent journalist Nick Shirley filmed himself at Quality Learning Center, only to find it appeared out to be out of operation. Homeland Security investigations said the Minneapolis warrants are part of the Trump administration's efforts to tackle rampant fraud of taxpayer dollars. A former senior advisor at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases has been indicted. He's accused of engaging in a scheme to evade Freedom of Information Act requests in connection with COVID-19 research grants. Here's more.
David Morans served as a senior advisor from 2006 through 2022. under Dr. Anthony Fauci. The Justice Department accuses Morans of hiding information and falsifying records to suppress alternative theories about the origins of COVID-19. Morans is also accused of receiving gifts in exchange for promoting the theory that COVID-19 had a natural origin in a prominent medical journal. According to the indictment, Morans and 2 alleged co-conspirators concealed their communications about research grants and funding using private email. Morans faces several charges, including conspiracy against the United States and destruction, alteration, or falsification of records in federal investigations.
A federal appeals court is allowing the Pentagon to tighten control over journalists' access, for now, citing national security concerns. In a 2-1 ruling, the panel said reporters must be escorted inside the building while the case moves forward, siding in part with the War Department. The decision temporarily pauses a lower court order that blocked key parts of the Pentagon's new media policy, which was challenged by the New York Times. Defense officials argue that unrestricted access was linked to leaks of sensitive or classified information, but the court also acknowledged the restrictions could burden reporting. The Pentagon introduced the policy last year. It allows officials to revoke access if reporters are seen as a security risk. A Pentagon spokesperson welcomed the ruling, saying journalists still have access to briefings and interviews. Some appointment changes. President Trump has withdrawn his nominee to lead the National Park Service. Scott Socha is a hospitality executive currently serving as president of Parks and Resorts at Delaware North. He was nominated by the president in February. Socha would have needed to be confirmed by the Senate before taking the position. The reason for the withdrawal is not yet clear. Federal agents execute criminal search warrants at more than 20 locations in Minneapolis. Authorities say the operations target alleged fraud. More news after this break. Stay with us.
I'm Amy Grant, and I want to talk to you from my heart about the heart. I would have been the last person on the list to say this woman has a problem with her heart. So no, there was nothing about my life that said, you have a ticking time bomb in your chest. But I did. I wound up in the office of a cardiologist because I was there with my husband. And at the tail end of that, the cardiologist looked at me and said, I want to see you. No one was more surprised than I was to learn I was living with a rare heart condition. He said, Amy, this condition, you'll be fine, and then catastrophic. A few months later, I had open heart surgery that saved my life. And I owe it to the research and life-saving medical breakthroughs developed by the American Heart Association. That's why I'm asking you to join me and become a monthly donor to the American Heart Association. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. If this could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, but your support can save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt you can wear to show you're part of a community of monthly donors working to help save more lives like mine. I'm grateful for the American Heart Association. Their research gave me more time to do the things I love with the people I love. So listen to your heart. I'm here today because I did. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor and help save even more lives. Thank you.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift, Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-514-7779 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-514-7779. 1-800-514-7779. Call now.